So I don't know if you know, but I was on a Twitter Spaces with you like 4 months ago, and
Okay.
we were talking about MicroStrategy, and it was pretty cool. We were just talking about your thoughts on Bitcoin. But I've been a fan for a while, and I'm happy you're joining the stream.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks. Nice to hook up with you.
All right, so how much time? What, 30 minutes? You got 30 minutes?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Here we go. First of all, big fan of Goodell. I actually paid for it. So
thank you. Great.
Yeah, I got into that $60 a month tier a while ago.
Now I have to be nice to you.
Now you have to be nice to me. Good. I have your Bloomberg competitor right here.
I can't say anything nasty at this point. You're a customer, so I work for you.
There we go. Okay, so my audience has really been interested in your thoughts in a variety of different areas: Palantir, Nvidia, Bitcoin, quantum. So I think we can take those one by one. But I think we'll start off with the elephant in the room. Everyone has been wondering why you are short quantum and how quantum is going up 4 or 5x. Is it just retail hype, momentum, or do you, the guy who has done pretty well for himself in life in terms of managing money, not understand the quantum thesis? So I'll just lay it out there. Are you right, or are the shorts going to get burned on quantum?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is going to be one of the biggest trades in my career. I think that, and my career is not, as you know, it's not in trading. My career is in being an entrepreneur. I built drug companies. I'm building a software company now. So it's not really one of these things where I, have wanted to, or I'm going to, be a hedge fund manager. Or I've never really wanted to do that. And, nevertheless, I find myself compelled because this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. There really hasn't been anything like this. I don't know if ever is the right term, but it's really a remarkable thing that's going on in the market, and it's wrapping a lot of people who are new to the market into it. And I think it's there's something like this happens every few years. We had the cannabis rally, we had NFTs, we had 3D printing, there's a lot of little mini bubbles, but this one's pretty preposterous. I mean, 3D printing could have been a thing, cannabis could have been a thing, and you just have to sort of wait and see. And then when all the cannabis companies reported earnings, they were really bad. Gross margins were negative. You can't build a business on negative gross margins. And, you sort of watch and kind of like decide that, okay, this is a cool and exciting idea, but the business just isn't there. Quantum is sort of like that. There's just no possible way that these companies could be successful.
There's no way they could be successful.
No way. Yeah. So my girlfriend's where a lot of people are experts, and we talk to all the same experts everyone else does, all the big names in the field. But the big names in the field are telling you that it's not possible. Scott Aronson, again, my girlfriend worked with him at MIT and at OpenAI. And in essence, Scott just doesn't believe that quantum's coming anytime soon. But worse than that, there's 4 quantum stocks: Rigetti, D-Wave, IonQ, and Quantum Computing Inc.
Correct.
2 of those are frauds. So IonQ and Rigetti are actually trying to build a quantum computer. Now, I think that's 30 years away. Even if you do build it, there's nothing there. But D-Wave and Quantum Computing Inc., in my opinion, and I know other people disagree, they are complete scams. So D-Wave has been around 20 years. They made 6 generations of their computers. They've never worked. You can't find a customer who says they work. You can't find a customer who actually uses the machines in production. In software, we call production live setting, the real deal. Not just, trying it out, see if this thing could work someday, but actually no, this is a part of our business.
Right.
No, not a single one that I'm aware of. And again, if the company could show one, I challenge them to do so. But, so I'm shorting these stocks. QCI was a beverage company. They're under investigation by the SEC. Not that I love the SEC, but, I think that, this is a company that basically didn't exist before. They had $30,000 of revenue last quarter, 30,000. Your stream and my stream do more than that. And I think that, for this to be a $2 billion publicly traded company that has a quantum is just silly. Again,
why? In your professional opinion, how did we get to 2 billion off 30,000 in revenue?
Liquidity. So it's liquidity. I love your stream, your viewers. I love my viewers. Not all of our viewers are the sharpest tools in the shed. There are a few amongst us who are not great at investing. You're excited. You want to buy the next NVIDIA. So do I. But you have to look through thousands of stocks to find the one gem. And that's not what people do. People are lazy. They don't want to do that. They want to read Reddit. They want to watch a YouTube. They see one thing that sounds exciting. Oh, that sounds like the future. I'm going to buy that. And, that's typically what happens. NFTs were the same way. Cannabis was the same way. How could you deny the sexiness of cannabis? You got a 100-year-old tobacco industry in the US, $100 billion companies, and now you have weed. Oh my God, this is going to be huge. Well, it turns out the business fundamentals just weren't that good. And the Tilrays went down 95%, Aurora Cannabis down 95%, et cetera. And the reality just hits you sometimes. And we all want to buy growth stocks. We all want to buy exciting stocks that could be the future. But you also have to do your homework. And the CEO of IonQ, former CEO and founder, had this very esoteric podcast, a physics podcast.
I saw you tweeting about it yesterday.
Yeah, 629 nanometer. It's like the nerdiest thing you can imagine. But this is where you find the alpha. And he went on there and he said that quantum computing is not going to be around for another 30 years. And there's no application. We don't know what they're good for, literally. And even the NSA. So the one thing I can see in quantum is that they would be extremely good for hacking and encryption breaking. And this is like a hobby of mine on the side, specifically with Bitcoin. And so I've played with quantum computers. I've bought every single commercial quantum computer. I'm a major user of their cloud time. Spent thousands of dollars of my own money on quantum computing. And I can tell you these machines don't work. They can't factor even the number like a million, which a child could factor with pen and paper. Right. These quantum computers can't do that. And it doesn't look like, oh, we're just around the corner, we're going to get a breakthrough. In fact, if anything, it looks like we may be at a logjam. Now, technology does progress. And sometimes you get these discontinuous jumps where it's like, oh, wow, okay, it didn't work before. And all of a sudden, boom, it works, kind of like AI. But the problem is, what are we going for? What is it that we're going to do when the magic machine shows up? And nobody can answer this question. And factoring numbers is fun. I like doing it. But the only thing it's good for is encryption. We've already had post-quantum encryption. In fact, the guy, his name is Chris Monroe. He's a genius. He's an idol of mine.
Yep.
He's probably going to win the Nobel Prize. Chris said that even the NSA doesn't want a quantum computer, which shocked me, actually. That's way more bearish than I ever was. He said that they just want to know when quantum computers are coming so they can prepare for it. And I thought that was fascinating because a lot of people think the NSA has a quantum computer or they're really interested in it. But that impression from the founder of IonQ was really surprising to me. I wouldn't have characterized it that way. And again, he's sort of explaining that even the big companies like Google and IBM don't have quantum computers that will work. He thinks they're wasting their money.
So I want to talk about Google and IBM, but here's the question. If you were the biggest quantum bull on the planet, what is the use case that you are the most excited about because of quantum?
I think it's people who are these people are confused. They don't understand what these computers can or can't do. So if you think about computing in general, Nvidia is the biggest computing company.
Right.
And XAI, OpenAI, these are the companies that buy these machines and they want to train models and run inference. These are hard to do computationally. Right. Quantum could never do those. It can't do those. Why? There's no memory. There's no RAM. There's no way to load the data into the machine. The machine has 100 qubits. You could how much can you can store your name in 100 qubits, maybe, but you can't store the corpus of the internet at 100 qubits. It doesn't do that. I think there's this confusion that like these are normal computers. You can I just watched this interview with John Preskill. Preskill is one of the fathers of quantum computing. Worked with Richard Feynman at Caltech, who invented quantum computers. The idea of them, at least. Right. Preskill said the interview said, Preskill, can this make me post on Instagram faster? And this is not what these machines do. These are scientific machines, and the only people really interested in them are scientists.
So if you had to come up with a use case that is uber bullish, what would it be?
I mean, there is this idea that you could, and listen, I have a vivid imagination. I can try to come up with one, and the best I could give you maybe would be simulating physics. So like a really good physics engine. But this gets back to a really interesting point that Jensen Huang said. He said he had the 10 quantum CEOs up on the stage, and he said, we don't need a better solution to the traveling salesman problem. So anybody who knows computing in the house knows is the NP hard problem that traditional computers struggle with. You cannot, if I give you 70 cities to, or 70 blocks of a city, where you have to drop off, mail at all 70 blocks. What is the optimal route? That's a really hard question. Combinatorially, it kind of explodes on you. It's like 2 to the 70th power or something crazy like that. But what's funny is that a regular old computer, a stupid ass laptop, can do this equation close enough. It gets like a 99% approximate of the perfect answer. And in fact, quantum computers, it's proven that if they don't have a complexity speed up for traveling salesmen, they probably could do it faster. But the point is, shaving a millionth of a second to get the optimal mathematical answer. This is something scientists are interested in. This isn't something Uber is interested in, or they would be investing. FedEx would be investing in quantum computing. UPS would be investing in quantum computing. These guys have a lot of money. They would be doing it. They're not.
Why did Jensen have them on stage?
So it's interesting. This is really fascinating. My girlfriend's dad was a senior guy at NVIDIA. And one of the funny things here, not that it gives me any insight, but, I've been following NVIDIA my whole life, and, it's the greatest company in the world. The question is, so he goes on stage before that and he says, quantum's 30 years away. It doesn't work. It's not interesting.
Right.
And the quantum stocks, fall. I made like $2 million that day. And I am sitting there watching this like, oh, this is great, and he shits on them over and over again. And the problem becomes these quantum companies call him and say, hey man, you really did a number on us. And, this is, what the hell, and I think Jensen just in that moment had this flashback to like when he was, making GPUs and everyone was laughing at him saying, GPUs don't matter. GPUs will never make a difference. And he was obviously right in the long run. And he basically said, I can't be that guy. I can't be the guy shitting on entrepreneurs, crapping on their dreams, telling them they're never going to work. I have to at least hear these guys out. This is the guy who knows the most about computing on planet Earth. And he said in his heart of hearts, he said 30 years away. He didn't change his mind. He didn't say, you know what, actually it's next year. He still thinks it's 30 years away. Yeah. And I feel like, again, we all want to be bullish on something. We all want to get the next 100 bagger, but just be careful what you wish for, because there's a lot of people that quit the stock market after they bought wheat stocks and they dropped 90%. People who quit the stock market or quit financial life when they bought Bored Apes at $1 million. I know a guy who had to sell his private jet. He bought a ton of Bored Apes and NFTs. This is real life. He literally was a private jet guy. Jet's gone. So he still has a Bored Ape. But useful.
I mean,
don't be that guy.
There was a guy who bought Beeple's NFT for $69 million. I think it's worth $20,000 from the last projections I saw.
I mean, if you want to be that guy, knock yourself out. But I feel like you're paying.
Do you think there is so much momentum in terms of liquidity for retail's buying Palantir, Tesla, Nvidia? Is there that much free money out there, even with 4% rates, that money's going into quantum and these types of stocks?
I think we're almost in a post-money world. And I think the way this sounds is a little philosophical, but we're getting to a point where money in essence is worthless, and things like attention is a new currency, right? When it's kind of anecdotal here, but again, hang philosophically for a second. 20 years ago in New York City, the average beautiful woman cared about what job you had, how much money you had.
Right.
Nowadays they might say, well, how many followers does he have? And it's one of these things that's a really a shift, because what can money buy you? I had lunch with Peter Thiel like 20 years ago, and he had this iPhone, and I'm sitting there saying, man, this guy's worth like 100 zillion times what I'm worth. I got nothing. And, I'm just starting my first drug company, and he's got the same phone I do. There's no luxury. We're eating the same meal. What does being rich really get you? And inflation's been the highest, the higher the price the asset is. So sports teams have gone up 20x. Picasso's have gone up 10x. The stuff that, the Veblen goods have gone up. The rest of us live the same life as even the wealthiest people. So money becomes one of these things that's really not that important. When COVID happened, our economy didn't go to zero. Everyone kind of threw a party. It was a very bizarre, thing. Unemployment's the lowest it's ever been. I'm not sure. And then finally, people use real money to chase crazy assets, a fart coin, Ethereum, Bitcoin, et cetera. These are interesting projects, but they're probably not worth trillions of dollars. And I think the fact that people have disposable income, look, this is a market, this is a cycle, at the bottom of the cycle, it'll be different. And there's always a bottom of the cycle. And it doesn't feel like, if I had to pick, it feels like we're closer to the top than the bottom.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions on quantum, and then I want to get into some thoughts around Bitcoin, Palantir, Nvidia, broader market. First of all, Martin, we thank you for taking your time, bro. Really appreciate it. Martin's Twitter, I'm putting it right here in the chat. He's doing some awesome stuff, building a nice Bloomberg competitor, so you guys can check that out. There's his Twitter right there. Okay, so here's a question. Are you accusing the quantum CEOs of fraud?
Yes and no. So I think that they're, fraud, the definition of fraud is something I'm very familiar with. Are they knowingly? It's a very technical thing. Sometimes I've beaten it and I've also lost it.
Yeah.
The technical definition usually is, are you knowingly misleading others? Are you knowingly saying false things? And I think the answer to that is unequivocally yes. But to other people, it means other things. If you have a safe harbor statement, you wrap yourself around it and say, well, these are subject to forward-looking statements. And, you can kind of do that and say, we may not build a quantum computer tomorrow. You don't know. So I think there's like,
it's kind of like you saying not financial advice, even though you don't believe in saying that, right?
Yeah, I personally don't believe in saying that, but I do think it's one of these disclaimers where if you really pin down the quantum computing companies, they would never do an interview with me, because I'd say, what date is it coming? And what will it do? And what's it going to do better? And who is going to buy it? And they won't be able to answer these questions because they're hard questions. And the reality is these companies are built on imaginations that are wilder than possibility. Again, like, it's okay to have a great imagination. Like, I have to do that as a business person. I dream one day that I can bring quantitative investing to the masses and you can trade like Jane Street and Citadel. That's my dream. Is it realistic? Maybe, maybe not, but it's possible. The quantum stuff is just not possible. The laws of physics and computing prohibit what they're talking about. Now, again, could there one day be computers made by IonQ or Rigetti, not by D-Wave or Quantum Computing Inc., because I don't think they have anything at all, and nobody even pays those companies any attention in the community. Preskill said that D-Wave is a fraud. This is a theoretical physics professor. He doesn't normally go out and call companies fraud. Scott Aaron said D-Wave is a fraud. But the real two companies, IonQ and Rigetti, which are the also-rans, these are runts of the litter, right? So the big quantum companies are IBM, number one, I'd say, Google, number two, Quantinium, number three, PsiQuantum, number four. There's 6 more privates, and then IonQ, and then Rigetti. So like, these are the runts of the litter. These aren't even the good pups. And, so they have a shot at maybe making a quantum computer someday, but there's no obvious thing they can do. So to me, fraud means, we know we don't know what the application is. We know that we don't know if we can make these or not, but we're going to still stoke excitement about it. Now, these companies almost went bankrupt, so they've had feast and they've had famine. They were 2 years ago, D-Wave was this close to bankruptcy because they couldn't get people excited. So as an entrepreneur, I kind of understand it's great when people are excited, but I do think some of these have been really irresponsible. I'll give credit real quick to answer your question definitively. The Rigetti CEO has been superb at saying, don't expect revenue. Right. Don't expect us to make a machine anytime soon. We are a research company. Stop thinking this is a near-term thing. And he's done that, and I have to applaud him for doing that, because the other guys are trying to tell you quantum is now, be excited today. And look, 5 years a lot can happen in 5 years, but as of right now, these machines are completely useless.
The D-Wave came out with some advanced hardware a week ago. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so they won't let anybody try it, and I think that's very telling, because IonQ lets me use their machine. Despite I'm the biggest, skeptic, IBM lets me use their machine. Rigetti lets me use their machine. New Era lets me use their machine. All of these other companies that
have you reached out to D-Wave?
I have, yeah.
And they said no.
You cannot get this machine without them banging you over the head trying to upsell you consulting services. So many people have published. There's a website called Archive, ARXIV. It's a scientific website. Many, many, many people who have access to D-Wave machine have published and showed that there is no speed up with the D-Wave machine. And in fact, I'm friends with a hedge fund called Carousdale. They put a short report out. Carousdale does real work. They're not, scammers. They've been in the hedge fund business a really long time. They don't get everything right, but in essence, they found that mostly what D-Wave does is they take their quantum computer, they attach it to a real computer, they give you the result, and they say, that they're doing something, but really the quantum part's not doing anything. And a former D-Wave employee said that the quantum part's just for show. So this company's been on 20 years. They've had 6 generations of this computer. They have the latest generation out now. Can't find anybody that says, I use this computer and it helps me. Can't find a single person.
Have you looked into any of the partnerships they have? Any of, I think, Toyota, MasterCard, stuff like that?
Yeah, we have. So all the people we've talked to have said, Kerrisdale and we have talked to almost everybody they've pointed out. Everybody says quietly, behind closed doors, it was a research agreement. It was an attempt. It was an attempt. Look, MasterCard's a $500 billion company. It was an attempt to think about possibly maybe improving one process at MasterCard, and it failed. And there's a reason. If any of these companies like the D-Wave machine, they would have 100 million in revenue. They would have $1 billion in revenue if these machines were useful. They don't have any revenue. Nobody's buying these fucking things.
Well, that's what's been confusing to me. Obviously, I've got some people that have been excited about quantum, and I saw these stocks at 3. My kind of value investor hat said I can't buy them. Then I see them go to 20, and I'm like, am I the idiot, or is yours, like, what's going on here? And I think you would say, yeah, you're kind of dumb for not buying at 3 because it could have gone to 20. But realistically, chasing it at 20 here is a little scary.
Oh yeah, it's nuts to even think about buying them here. But I would say, look, at 3, part of, there was a technology in biotech called RNAi, and people were skeptical about RNAi, including myself. And RNAi came through. It happened. It really transpired, and I wouldn't say it changed the face of medicine, but it was a real thing and it worked. So it doesn't mean that technology can't work, but when you're pricing in the industry actually not just working, but becoming huge right very soon, that's where the value investor has to say, no, there's a chance it doesn't work.
Right.
And the chance is actually pretty decent. There's a chance that even if it works, you're not the company that wins. And then there's a chance commercializing it's not going to be great. And then there's a chance that, if you discount all these cash flows, nothing's happening. It's a terrible investment. So I feel like, lotto tickets are out there. Fartcoin is worth $1 billion. NFTs are not really having a comeback, but there's meme coins are the new form of NFTs. So those have been on a bubble. There's other bubbles in like some of these aviation stocks, nuclear, a bunch of stuff. People want the big bull win. And I get that, everybody wants the 100X, but this is exactly what cannabis felt like. It's exactly what NFTs felt like. And people will literally tell you to your face, you're stupid for not owning Fartcoin. And you're stupid for not owning Bored Ape at $1 million. Well, Bored Ape's $10,000 now. And, there were people that were bamboozled, basically tricked into buying Bored Apes for millions of dollars. And, that's what this is. Yeah, it's dazzling. When you look at the Bored Ape, it went from 0 to $1 million.
Yeah.
And at $1 million, a bunch of people said, I can't take it anymore. I have to buy it. And the price action's too good. What if it goes to 10 million? This is going to be like a Picasso. Picasso's at 100 million. This might be bigger than Picasso. So it's a steal at $1 million. Just listen to common sense.
That's what's been confusing me, because you got amazing companies like an Nvidia and Palantir that fell damn near 40-50% over the past 2 months.
Right.
But people went into the most speculative parts of the market, and that's where I'm like, what stage of a cycle is this? Or is this even?
I think it's the Kaplan frontier. So the Kaplan frontier, it basically just says the more risk you take, the more reward you get.
Right.
And that is true. So who looks the best when there's high beta, when the market's going up? The highest risk stuff looks the most attractive. And you sit there having FOMO saying, ooh, I really want that Fartcoin. It went up 30% in a day. Imagine if my portfolio went up 30% a day. I'd be rich. And then you realize that, wait a second, it doesn't make sense to buy something called Fartcoin. It doesn't really make sense to buy something in quantum computing. Maybe I should buy Coca-Cola. And you buy Coca-Cola, it doesn't move. In fact, it might go down. And so it's frustrating being an investor. It's not easy. But the answer is not buy the riskiest asset that you can find. Options, for example, a lot of people love to trade options. They wipe out their account. They put more money in their account when they have it, and they wipe it out again. And I just really think there's a better way to invest that is exciting, but not stupid. And, of course, there's no easy way to do it. The quant funds are basically just running roughshod over the whole market. They're making so much money that, it's sick. And, if you can't beat them, join them in a way. And I think that, trading as a human is extremely difficult. And I just wouldn't advise it. And again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's like playing chess against a machine. Not even Magnus Carlsen can beat the chess machine, but you want to try? I don't think you can beat Citadel and Jane Street. I think the only way to do it is to sort of play the game on their level, which it's hard.
Last question on quantum, then I want to move on. How leveraged are you into these shorts, and could you blow up your entire net worth if this goes against you?
Yeah, so I've been in this situation a million times. I'm not worried about that. Unlike other people, I do have access to capital outside of just my own. Yeah. So I've been making the rounds to various billionaires. As this trade goes up, I have more confidence to go to the people I used to work with, to go to the people I met on my travels over the years, and say, listen, I got a deal for you. This is the greatest trade I've ever seen. Do you want to short these stocks? It's an unbelievable opportunity. And if they go up higher, I just raise more capital and find more capital and short more of it. Because
what are these conversations with the billionaires like? Are they like, holy crap, this is a bubble, take as much money as you want?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. They a lot of these guys are long stuff, so finding shorts is something they're interested in. They don't have mark to market. The hedge funds can't short right now.
Right.
That's why these stocks are popping as well. GameStop just put a kibosh on shorting. And the hedge funds, if a short goes against them even 10%, they're out. They're chicken. In my day, Tiger, Soros, I worked at a Tiger Cub. We were fearless. The fund I was working for literally was called Intrepid. We had no fear. We were short a stock if it went up 10x on us. It doesn't matter. We'll short more. And, Melvin was a Tiger Cub too. A lot of people don't know this. And when our funds interacted a lot. And, Melvin should have stuck through the GameStop short. They should have just kept piling in. And he had the capital. I think he didn't want to do it for business reasons because he had, his firm. He didn't want to sort of continue with that firm and owe investors more money. And it was like a technical reason, but he absolutely could have gotten 5 billion from here, 5 billion from there and said, game on, I re-raise you in poker. And I think that, he should have done that. But, I think that he had his own reasons. He's still a billionaire. He's not sitting there crying. And I think, it's the same way, I'm a professional. I'm not worried about, these stocks going up. They could go up more. They could go up 50x. Anything can happen. But we will find a way to pop the bubble and make money on the trade. Now, Tiger and Soros, two of the biggest firms in the world, in 2000, they quit at the top, shorting stocks. Right at the top, they said, I can't take it anymore. Get me out. Cover these shorts. And guess what happened? It was over. That was the literal top of the NASDAQ. It took 15 years to come back. So,
you have supreme confidence on this.
What's that?
You have supreme confidence on this trade.
Yeah. I mean, I try to be sober, but if I look at the history of all the stuff I've shorted over 25 years, this is up there. I mean, I remember shorting internet stocks in 2000 and, it was hard to fight that narrative. Martin, don't you know the internet's going to be the biggest thing ever? Of course. Yeah, I use it. I'm a kid. And, people tell me, you're playing with fire. The economy's changing. All the rules are going to be rewritten, et cetera, et cetera. And, it didn't bother me. It didn't faze me. Quantum isn't anything like that. Quantum is not going to change the world like the internet did. Quantum's not going to change the world like AI is doing as we speak. It's really a farce. And it's a Me Tooism. It's a FOMO. I missed AI. I missed Nvidia. I need the next thing. What's the next big thing? Well, look, I mean, there's stocks that are privately held. I think one of the biggest problems you and my communities are going to have is that these stocks like SpaceX, privately held. You and I can't buy them.
Yeah.
You need millions of dollars to buy them, at least. And SpaceX went from 5 billion to 350 billion. Sucks for you. Sucks for me.
You're saying retail investors see the big guys make money by getting in early because they're accredited, and then they flock to Fartcoin to make up for that. But that
you're chasing that. You want the SpaceX, you want the OpenAI, but guess what? You're not in that club, and you'll never be in that club. And I really like Palmer Luckey at Anduril. I'm proud to call a friend. He wants to take his company public because he wants the average Joe to be able to buy a stock. And Palantir did the same thing. And look at how many millionaires Palantir has made. Average people who bought Palantir.
Let's transition to that. Palantir. My channel, my community is heavily focused on it. What are your thoughts on this name?
It's an amazing company. I mean, you can't deny the unbelievable success they've had. As I said, I have somewhat of a conflict of interest, but the LLM revolution is changing the world. What Palantir does, which I think a lot of people don't know, a lot of people say nobody knows what they do, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the case. In essence, what they're doing now is they're taking LLMs and going to businesses that don't understand how to implement them across enterprises.
So you and I know how to use LLMs. Your chatbot. My girlfriend is mad at me. What should I say? And you hit enter. Or you ask it something more complicated. Even coders know how to use it to write code. I use it every day to write code. But at an enterprise, it's a little different. At an enterprise, you might have something like Coca-Cola has invoices from around the world that they need to translate. So what they do is they hire translators, send them to the translators. They wait for the response back. It's a real pain in the neck, and you can't do it automated. So it's done by hand. So there's people that manage the translators, and all of this stuff. And you have controls and audit and things like that have to look over it. So Palantir comes in and says, you know what? We can write the software that does all of this. We already have it. We just have to implement it. And basically all this will go from 800 people or 200 people. And it doesn't matter what it is, invoicing, it can be document translation, it could be intake, whatever it is. And we're going to use LLMs off-the-shelf LLMs. We don't have to use OpenAI. We can use DeepSeek, or we can use whatever. And we're going to make this so it's a bulletproof business process that just runs with 5 people. And you're going to save $100 million a year. And our software is going to be really expensive. We're going to take like 20 million of that, but you're going to love it. And
is that why you think they're getting the multiple? Because they're the most expensive software stock in the market.
Well, so what's interesting about multiples is they only make sense if the company's in a steady state. So you can pay 18 times for the market because on average the market's growing a small amount.
Right.
Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, you can kind of eyeball, okay, the growth is like this. But when a company has sales that are growth that's changing rapidly, everything changes. The funny thing about Palantir that's really bizarre, and this happened to me with Google when Google IPO'd around 2005, the second derivative of sales can go up. Almost all of us in normal life, we're used to the faster you grow and the more money you make, it slows down. You can't, it's the law of large numbers. You can't grow faster. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's what's happening in Palantir. And I think it's going to be a situation. I talk to people who tell me Palantir is expensive. Isn't it crazy? I say, hold on. Let's do the math. First of all, you have to look at free cash flow. Everyone looks at revenue or something like that. It's like, no. Start with the cash. Are they making cash? How much are they making? You do the numbers and it's actually quite reasonable.
60% free cash flow margins.
Yeah. I don't have my model in front of me, but I think it's around 100 times free cash flow. And again, you might say, Martin, that's a lot. Well, hold on. If free cash flow is going to double every year for the next 5 years, which they might beat that. I think that, you're talking about, pretty insane, 2 to the 5th is 16 billion. So a company makes 16 billion. You can put a multiple on that and you get a stock price that's higher. Look, it's not a cheap stock. It's not for the faint of heart. It's gone up a lot. Would I rather buy it at 60 or 80? Yeah. But it is an unbelievably well-run company. I think growth is going to accelerate. Earnings growth is going to accelerate. And that's what nobody prices in, is that it's growing 40%. Okay, it's going to go back down to 30, then 20, then 10. Nobody has in their model 80% revenue growth, which they very easily could do. And they're fighting hard to do it. And I don't know how you bet against Alex. I mean, the execution is off the charts.
Okay, so last question on Palantir. Alex Karp, how do you feel about him as a CEO?
I think he's really great. I mean, the individualism is something that in 2015, I went through this little business crisis myself. And, people said, the PR people said, you just got to be quiet. You're being too individualistic. People know who you are. They know your quirks. Just don't do it. And I ask you, do you know who the CEO of Eli Lilly is? Do you know by first name basis and what his quirks are? Do you know the CEO of Bristol Myers? Do you know the CEO of Amgen? No, they're all flat suits. CEO of Coca-Cola. I have no idea. I'm supposed to be a business expert. I love the markets. I don't know who these people are. Yeah. But you know who Alex Karp is. You know who Palmer Luckey is. You know who Elon Musk is. You know who Mark Zuckerberg is. You know who Sam Altman is. Because they're real people. They're individuals. They have flaws. They have great features. Alex, is really interesting individual. And one of the greatest people in business today is this woman named Lulu Cheng, who's mostly an advisor to CEOs. Proud to call her a friend. She advises some of these CEOs that I just mentioned. And she's told them, like, Martin was the first guy to actually stick his neck out and be himself. Yeah. And now people like Palmer, well, Palmer always was, but people have said, I'm going to show everyone the real me. And it's better than the fake me. And Alex has flaws. He's weird, but he's one of these guys that lets it all hang out, and you know who he is, and you know that you can believe in him. And that's why he has the cult that he's got. And I think that, it's sort of a testament to his success. He's one of the best hiring, people in the world, which is what management's all about. At the end of the day, one of the things I've learned over time is your individual contribution is meaningless to most companies.
Yep.
Once you get to 1,000 people, 2,000 people, what are you going to do personally that lifts, the world, that lifts your company? Nothing. The only thing you could do is find really great people and make those people work really well. And this guy, the staff at Palantir, I don't know if there's another company in Silicon Valley that's as good as them.
I'm just so happy you said that, because I feel like most of us have been saying that for the past couple of years. Everyone, Alex Karp makes these weird jokes, or he puts his neck out and says that he just doesn't care what his political beliefs. He's not censoring himself at all about how he thinks about the world. But in exchange for the sacrifice of being yourself, you might develop an authentic audience. I think that's one of the things I've done with my YouTube channel. That's one of the things you've done. And that's what creates success.
Yeah, I talked to Palmer Luckey about this. The number one thing that you need to do at a company is you have to get people to believe.
Yes.
And they have to, when they believe, they're working Saturday and Sunday. When they believe, they'll kill for you. It's that kind of religion at Palantir. A normal company, guys leaving at 5 p.m. Guys checking out. Oh, another sick day. Oh, another vacation day. That's not how it works at Palantir. These guys are hell bent on success, and they've made each other rich. Every single guy at Palantir is a millionaire. And that's the kind of company you want to work at. And it just creates this flywheel of success. Now, again, the numbers have to catch up,
right?
But I don't see why they can't be $1 trillion company. You look at OpenAI, which is obviously, going to be a $1 trillion company. You inevitably have Palantir as the enterprise kind of version of OpenAI, where they basically are doing these like bespoke AI applications, which are arguably a bigger market than OpenAI, because they go into the Fortune 500. Their TAM is the entire business world.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about, is really nuts. Like, they are actually just applying AI to solve all bottlenecks, all inefficiencies of all corporations. And if you think about how big that TAM is, like, there's no reason it can't be a $10 trillion company. The problem is markets, as you know, we have to take things one quarter at a time.
Yeah.
So, it's one of these things where it's like, when do you buy it? What if next quarter's bad? It's going to be down 50%. So, it's a really tough thing to own, but that's because markets price in on a razor's edge, just the right price. And you have to have this bet that he's going to execute to perfection and then some, and you will get rewarded if that happens. If he executes only well, look out below. It's going to be a rough stock to own. So it's one of these stocks where, during the tariff nightmare, that's the stock you buy first. That's like, you put it on a list and you're like, if it ever goes to this price, I'm going to buy it. But you still have to watch the quarters like a hawk, because if they say, look, things are slowing down, we're not able to execute as well as we can, it's Accenture that's somehow competing with them and doing really well in AI implementations, then you just have to call a spade a spade. But obviously, they're running circles around Accenture and Booz Allen and all these other old school systems integrators that just charge you a fortune. Like, this is how IBM is still a $200 billion company. Like, if IBM's a $200 billion company, just do 5x whatever IBM's worth. That's Palantir's worth.
I love it. No, it's very encouraging to hear someone, because you are very valuation heavy. I watch your streams and you really go through the numbers. So everyone that I hear from the bear side of Palantir, been hearing for the past couple of years, is that it's expensive. But your
same thing happened 2006. Google went public. The Tiger Cub community, like I said, is very close. And there's this one guy who's like a little bit of a leader in that community, Steve Mandel, Lone Pine. Lone Pine became the second largest stockholder of Google.
Wow.
Second largest. And people said, Steve's crazy. How he bought like 4% of Google. Google, this was like 15 billion market cap or something like that. And Google, had this torrential tear. And everyone said, how are you buying this thing? It's 100 times earnings, it's et cetera. And he said, you don't get it. They're growing 30% right now. They're about to grow 50% for many years in a row. And cash flow is just going to double every year. You're messing with the wrong business. You have to buy this thing. And he was right. And every traditional value guy looked at it and said, I can't own this thing.
Yeah.
But value isn't about a PE multiple. Value isn't about any multiple. Value is about what are the long-term steady state, when the business is kind of maturing and in a normalized situation. When that happens, what are those cash flows like? Is it $1 billion? Is it 5 billion? Is it 20 billion? For Google, it's about 100 billion. So at the time, cash flow is like pretty meager. But you have to envision, what does it look like? And Palantir, when you think about it, you say, okay, if they are in the enterprise at every Fortune 500, fixing broken systems, fixing inefficiencies. If you've ever worked at a Fortune 500, I have briefly, the whole thing's a shit show. The whole thing's a mess with the inefficiencies. So they go out there and say, you've heard our reputation. We're Palantir. We're like we're
now
the
they're the
best
cool
of the
kid.
best.
It used to be the weird kid 4 years ago. Now people want to partner with them, and because they're kind of the poster child of AI. So I agree.
And they do it for the government. They say, if we can do it for the CIA, how can we do it for you? I think that they're going to just sort of run everything, and it's going to be as ever present as IBM was in the 80s and things like that. So I'd say Palantir is still a 3 to 5x at least. But it's one of these things. There's a value guy. You're really sticking your neck out, and you don't want to get disappointed because one bad quarter and that's all it takes. But I do think that these what they do, how they implement AI, it actually does work. Their customers are not paying them by accident. They are earning their value.
Yeah. Nvidia, is this the greatest company in the world, and can they keep up the growth?
I think so. I briefly shorted the stock last night because just for a trade, I think that the quarter wasn't as good as I thought it would be. But I think that Nvidia has 3 kind of major advantages that will just propagate it to 10 trillion market cap. Why I'm shorting it, again, I just wanted an instant reaction to the quarter. Very, very, very small position. Think thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars. And so just like maybe it'll go down for 5 minutes kind of thing. And we all know that even cheap stocks will sometimes like digest a quarter that kind of like is pretty sloppy. This is a bit of a sloppy quarter. But the 3 big things for Nvidia are, you have AGI, which in essence is going to require huge amounts of compute. Claude was down yesterday. We're big Claude users over here. As much as I hate to admit it, I don't like the people at the company, but they have great software. We use Claude, and the demand was so high for their latest model, the company couldn't serve it. They crashed. They have to rate limit it. There is no limit to the amount of intelligence people want. And that's why Palantir is, such a good long. There is absolutely no limit to the amount of intelligence that, I'm almost breaking even here. There's no limit. Still holding an L, but I shorted at 139. I just thought the market would react negatively, even though they're obviously doing great. I thought that the market got too, the price is just, the expectations are very high. It turns out that people thought this would be a bad quarter, and they put in an okay quarter,
especially ex-China.
Yeah, that's sort of a mess, and it's hard to interpret. Are they telling the truth? Is China really that big of a business for them? Why can't China just get these chips from somewhere else? It's tough to digest. But if you zoom out, forget the shenanigans of like the machinations of like the near-term quarter stuff, which is on Wall Street, it's a game in essence of it's a poker game of who's positioned where, and like, is Fidelity going to sell? Is this good? You're basically asking, was this quarter good enough for Fidelity? Fidelity is the biggest it's the biggest mutual fund that actively manages their portfolio. So it's like, what's Fidelity going to do on this quarter? It has nothing to do with what you think. It's all about what are the big market players going to do. So zooming out from that, those near-term shenanigans, the 3 big things. I mean, AGI is basically every single person is going to have AGI, and it's going to make NVIDIA $100,000 per person. It's going to be so productive that you basically, every human being is going to have a chip allocated to them practically for this new form of intelligence. And it's going to be, really cost effective. You're going to get multiples of that in productivity. The second big thing is autonomous vehicles. This is happening. The cars are driving themselves, and that's not going to stop. And these things need NVIDIA. I did a tour of Waymo. Some Waymo engineers were kind enough to give me a tour. They work great. They're expanding to every city. Elon's dropping them too. These all run on AI. They are AI machines on wheels, and they cannot work without AI. So it's a huge thing for NVIDIA. And you're talking about saving lives, quite frankly, and changing the face of transportation. So that's not, I think, in the stock price at all. And then the third thing is robotics. This is like the be all end all. Elon's betting his life, his legacy, basically, on robotics. And he's saying there's going to be more robots than humans. He's not kidding. He really thinks that. If you want to be amazed, and we've seen some cool robot stuff, but look at Figure.ai. They're making really nice humanoid robots. Valuation's $50 billion. This is the biggest TAM as well that exists.
Yep.
Human labor can be automated. And, are these machines truly generalizable? Can they really do anything? We don't know. But one of the things we could say that Sam Altman likes to say about AI, for at least for LLMs, is this is the worst it'll ever be. Right. And, that's kind of, amazing if you think about it. Now, we don't, robotics is one of these crapshoots, but clearly Tesla stock, probably about half of it is robotics valuation. And we just trust Elon and, he'll figure it out. Some people think robotics is a fraud and that it suffers from too many dimensions of freedom where the machine just won't be able to be like us. I disagree. I think that we have synthetic training data at this point where these machines can actually do anything. And I think various companies, including OpenAI and others, are going to start betting very heavily and more publicly that robotics is the future. When are we going to see machines out in the wild? When are you going to walk across the street and look to your left and it's a robot walking across the street with you, or robots going to buy groceries or something? It's going to happen. That's the world we're going to live in. I don't know if it's this year or not, or 5 years or 10 years, but it's definitively technologically within our capability. And you are talking about one of the biggest sea changes in humanity. Think about this. 1998, Elon Musk is on a listserv. Listservs don't exist anymore. It's a mailing list for crypto cypherpunks. And if you look through this mailing list, it's fascinating. He's sitting there posting about, this stuff 10 years before Satoshi. And okay, cool. PayPal, co-founder. He's talking about digital money, sending money around the world before anybody's talking about it. Tesla, first guy to autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles. A lot of people forget. OpenAI, he's the co-founder.
Yeah,
he was there too. Yeah. SpaceX, first guy to do satellites cheaply. Neuralink, and now robotics. He's telling you this is going to be the biggest thing Tesla's ever done.
Do you think Tesla's overvalued?
What's that?
You think Tesla's overvalued?
No. It's just like Palantir. It's the trad value guy says, oh my God, it's such a short. It's so obvious. Look at the cash flow deteriorating, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, okay, value the car business, put it aside. Now value the cyber taxi business, put that aside. Basically it's an old shitty stodgy company. That's a lot of business. Sorry, Elon. That's kind of there. And maybe that's worth 200 billion. Toyota's worth 200 billion.
Right.
Cool. And maybe he can make that grow. I don't know. But that's the conservative assumption. What would the best cyber taxi startup be worth? Well, Waymo's worth 50, but Waymo doesn't have Elon. So maybe, and they're not a car company at all, right? So maybe that's 100. So that's robotaxis. Now, how about autonomous? It's slightly different from robotaxis. How about some of the new cars they're going to make? You have to value each of these as a sort of a separate business. And then finally, robotics, you have to value. And robotics, would I pay 500 billion for a robot startup? Probably not. But the market is sort of as a sum of parts. I forget all the parts, quite frankly, right now. But I did a sum of parts analysis, and it's sort of fairly valued to me, unless robots is even bigger than we think. Yeah, which it might be. I mean, that's what you're betting on. And if the greatest, I'm telling you, go to 1998. Elon's 20-something years old, and he's posting about cryptocurrency 10 years before it happens. This guy can tell the future. I don't know how, but he can tell the future. And the VCs I talk to, Mark Andreessen or Peter Thiel, they all tell you, don't bet against Elon. He's that guy. He can tell that robots are going to be the future. Then robots are going to be the future. And, how big they're going to get is another question. But conceivably, we could all have a robot each. And again, powered by NVIDIA. They have to be powered by AI. And, whether Tesla uses NVIDIA or not, I don't think is that important, because as much as Tesla will try, they won't have 100% market share. Right. There'll be other companies. Probably Tesla will still use NVIDIA, but even if they don't, the other companies will. So you got three huge things that NVIDIA, you basically have to use NVIDIA to power the future. All of the future is based on intelligence being digital, and it all has to go through NVIDIA, which is crazy if you think about it. Somebody else should be able to make money on this, but they just have it locked in. And that's why I think NVIDIA is going to be the first $10 trillion company. Do you think Elon's attempt at Doge was meaningful, or it was a waste of time? I think he learned what a lot of people learn. In the hedge fund world, you meet a lot of rich people who get bored. I'd even put Vivek in that category. I love Vivek. Yeah, consider him a friend, but you sort of, you did your thing in business, you made a lot of money, and you say, what's next? Bloomberg did this, et cetera. What most of these guys find is they step one day in politics and they say, oh, no, I don't want because, and I've seen this story play out maybe 100 times. You make however much money, you decide, you want to see what politics is like, and you never go back. And 5% of those people like it, and they figure it out, and they make it work. The Bloombergs of the world. But most people say this isn't real life. Like, I cannot do this, because it is mostly people who are, pretty slimy, and they're not telling you the truth. They're duplicitous. They're, it's very much an optics game and perception. And, you have these slick people that are not worried about actually executing, which business people do. They're much more worried about, propagating their image.
Yeah, getting reelected.
Yeah, that's it. And I think he learned the hard way. And now it seems like that relationship is fracturing. He said yesterday he was disappointed in Trump's budget, that it was so much spending. It seems like they're headed for a divorce. But, I think that, Trump also is such an iconoclast trying to get into the system and change it. And even he can't change it. It's so hard to make that system change. So business people just get annoyed at this, and they realize that you have to think about politics on a 30, 40-year time scale. They're used to changing stuff in 3 or 4 days. Elon's 3 or 4 minutes. If you don't respond to me, you're fired. Right. So I think that, it's not hard. It's not a surprise that he's, sort of saying, I thought I could do X, Y, and Z. It turns out the court stopped me. Thought I could do X, Y, and Z. Turns out some Republican senator who has a power card to play, can, kill this whole thing.
Robinhood, Vlad Tenev. I bought a lot of call options on the stock when it was $8. It was one of the biggest wins I've had in the market from an options perspective. $60. Is Robinhood the future of finance? How do you think of this company?
I do think it's the future of finance. I compete with them. I talked to Vlad about doing something with my product. The guy's just a genius. He figured out that there's huge untapped potential in brokerage. I can't say I love every single thing he does. I think he has gamified the market a little bit. But I think he's going to build the next big financial institution. I would not be surprised if he built a $200-300 billion company that was bigger than Goldman Sachs. Wow. If you look into Vlad's history, this isn't a guy to bet against. And when you see a guy like this, who's him's kind of reminds me a little bit of this too. When you see really talented managers, it took me 25 years of investing and beating my head against the wall sometimes to learn some of these lessons. So I hope some of you guys will avoid those 25 years of pain that I had. When you see a great manager managing a business and it's just growing and growing, I think you just buy and forget about it. And you just let them compound, especially if they have a big open vision. And the big open vision here is finance could be more digital. Finance could be more inclusive. Finance could look different. And I'm going to make the next Goldman Sachs or the next JP Morgan. And he's doing it. And you just watch and enjoy, is he going to be a perfect straight line up? Probably not. But, you have to be amazed at this guy. Again, I consider him a rival, so I feel like, I'm just amazed at his abilities. And look at his math career. If you actually want to be really impressed that the guy isn't just some dope that figured it out. Every guy, thousands of people have tried to make online brokerages and failed. Yeah. This guy did something right. Same thing with HIMS. Anybody can make a little telehealth app tomorrow, a little prescription app tomorrow. You could spin one up tonight. It's a big difference to make it a $10 billion company. And in Robinhood's case, he's at 60 billion now. You have to give credit where credit's due. And clearly he's onto something. Now, does that mean the ride lasts forever? If you look at Palantir, you look at Robinhood and you say, these guys are so good. Tesla even, how much can these guys compound and when will it stop? And look, the reality is it does stop at some point. CEOs get rich. They decide, maybe I'm bored. Maybe I'm going to have 65 kids. Maybe I'm kidding, but maybe I'm not going to be so interested in this. And one sign, if you want to be vicious, and I think sometimes you have to be in this business, Vlad started a second company recently. And I had investors a long time ago who said, Martin, if you ever do something like that, we're taking all our money out. If you ever even get a girlfriend or get married, we have a problem because you're supposed to be managing our money.
Do you think there could be a symbiotic relationship because it's an AI company? Robinhood's doing AI. Maybe that's
looks like a distraction to me. He's a mathematician. He loves math. So do I. But if I was seriously ruthless, I'd just be like, what is that shit? Yeah. So that's he'll probably be fine. But when you look at these telltale signs, what are you doing? You know, and you just have to watch it carefully because even the best CEOs, they fall off the horse. And I guess what I'm saying is when you trust and believe so much in the Karps and the Musks and the Tenevs, you do have to sit there and sort of say, well, trust but verify. I bet on you and I believe in you, but watch the quarters, watch the things they do, and if you ever get uncomfortable, just hit the sell button. It's not that hard. I think the biggest mistake I see individual investors make is they get married. They just can't ever hit the sell button. We have a guy in our chat, he's named Alejandro. We call him Bagajandro because he's a bag holder. He's up so much on IonQ. He just can't hit sell for some reason. And it's like, look, man, you doubled your money. You're right. You licked me. I lost 2 or 3 million on this. Just hit the sell button. But for whatever reason, every time it goes up, he invents a new reason to be long. Yeah. And, it's a symptom that a lot of people have. And there's nothing offending about selling. There's nothing the company doesn't give a shit about you. You don't get points in the stock market for being loyal. Do you get loyalty points? People say they're proud. They say, I've owned Palantir since this price. I've owned Palantir since this year. You don't get extra stock for that.
No, you don't.
Alex Karp doesn't send you a Christmas card for that. No. Your job is to protect your portfolio. And if you start to see Karp's acting weird and the numbers aren't as good as I thought they'd be, you just sell. It's not going to kill you. Find the next Palantir. A lot of people spend all of their energy on the portfolio they have now.
Yeah.
You should be spending a lot of energy on the portfolio of stocks that you don't know about that could be the next Palantir. Go worry about, just constantly scrutinizing these stocks. You made your bed. You already have Palantir. Why study it? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Keep on tabs on it, but you got to go find the next one and the next one and the next one. Because eventually Palantir will fall off the horse. Tesla might fall off the horse.
And investing is ruthless. You've got to be able to compound and find the next one. I want to ask you about HIMS, but real quick, SoFi, this online bank tech platform.
Don't know it that well. My friend Mike Cagney once, I was meeting him in San Francisco, and I said he was working for Paul Getty, one of the wealthy dynastic families in America. And I said, what are you interested in? He said, online banks. And he started SoFi, and he got kicked out for sexual harassment reasons. I know they went public. They kind of did a SPAC, and they seem to have gotten things together, but
you don't think of them as competitors to Robinhood or anything like that.
You don't know it. I always call a spade a spade. If I don't know a stock inside and out, I just tell you.
Got it. Okay. HIMS. You went on the HIMS House podcast. I've been on that podcast. There's a big cult following on this one. Are you long HIMS?
I'm not long. I was long when I was on the podcast. Then it fucking doubled or something like that. I sold it. I even shorted it briefly. And I shorted HIMS and bought Palantir as a pair trade. Because HIMS had this so-so quarter and Palantir had this killer quarter.
Yeah.
And HIMS went up 20% on the quarter and Palantir's flat on the quarter. And I was like, hold on, this is going to reverse. And it reversed. So I do trade sometimes. I put the trader hat on. But when I put the investor hat on, this is obviously a management team that knows what the hell they're doing. This TAM is also kind of infinite. Healthcare is full of broken shit to fix. And one of the first broken things to fix was, why can't I just get a prescription for the drug I want? And the answer is, well, doctors have to decide first. And it's like, well, what the fuck does this doctor know anyway? And the reality is, yes, look, I wouldn't want you to do surgery on me, brain surgery on me, Amit. But I do think that, I can fill my own prescription for birth control if you're a woman and you want birth control. What's the big deal? Everybody knows. Everybody takes these drugs. It's really not that serious. Cholesterol medicine. You don't need a doc for every single damn thing. And I think when you go to the doctor, it tends to create, you have to do a blood draw. Blood draw had this. Well, we're going to have to biopsy that. And it's this constant back and forth of you overutilizing healthcare. When the reality is give me this drug, and this drug. And that's the way it should be. And I feel like, they have a check and balance there in a teledoctor, checking and making sure. But the reality is we spend way too much on healthcare. It's bankrupting our country. And HIMS is, odd as it sounds, it's sort of an attempt to sort of fix some of that, as well as providing people satisfactory service. I hate going to the doctor to renew my script.
Yeah.
The doctor says, I'm not going to renew the script unless you come in, and I want to make sure that, these are the drugs I still want to prescribe. And there's a reason he's doing that. It's not for, fun or safety. It's because he gets money doing that, and he can build his practice up. And, HIMS is kind of a challenge to the healthcare system of saying, let's do things differently.
Do you think they have a moat?
I don't think they need one. I think that, moat is a funny word. I had a bunch of friends at American Express who are investors with me that Buffett was a big investor in American Express, and Buffett visited Amex, and this is like an off the cuff, unrecorded kind of like chat. And Buffett's done a lot of these. And if you collect little tidbits you hear from people, it's kind of fascinating what he's not said publicly. And for moats, he said, you guys have a moat, but what's a moat? He said, moat is when the customer uses a different part of their brain to buy the product.
Right.
What does that mean? Well, the part of my brain that buys the product, when I look at, I don't know, a software service, I look at the price and I sort of say, I don't know, is this worth it to me? Do I want to pay $9.99 a month for this shit? Oh, maybe. When you see the Gucci hat and you say, I need that. Yeah, I don't care what the price. What's the price? You're already at the checkout and you look at the price. You need it. I don't care about fashion myself, but the point is, there's a different part of your brain that's operating. And I think Hims, it's tricky. On one hand, it's kind of a different part of your brain, but on the other hand, it's not. I think that their brand name is very valuable. People know Hims, they trust it. But on the other hand, yeah, I mean, somebody else could erode it over time. Their job is to build it and build it and build it and get it to a point where nobody can do that and they make a fortress. So far, they've done well. There's thousands of these fucking things. Right. And we know Hims, there's Row, but like
you don't like it at 55. I think
it's okay. Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's actually kind of cheap too, because they're actually growing cash flow really fast. Yeah. But all of Wall Street's really pessimistic because no moat, what's going to happen after GLPs, et cetera. But if you just take a step back and say, does this management, they've grown sales. So what's amazing about these kids is they're really young. Look at revenue 5-6 years ago. They barely had any. They have $2 billion in revenue now.
Yeah.
They went from like 50 in revenue to $2 billion.
Yeah.
Who does that? Can you do that? Can I do? I've never done that. I made a $2 billion company. We never went from start to $2 billion in revenue. Holy moly. Who does that? It just shows you that these people know what they're doing. Now, again, you got to watch it like a hawk, but unlike Palantir and Tesla and even Robinhood, maybe, the valuation on Hims is quite reasonable. The price to cash flow is like 20 times. It's really not, some wild number. Now, Wall Street, the bears on Wall Street think that cash flow is about to collapse,
right?
GLP and so forth. I don't know for sure. It does. I would argue it's just as likely it doubles. But it's one of these stocks that's like, it's tricky. I wish everything were cut clear, very, very clear longs. I mean, it could be rocky if the deal they have with Novo is a little complicated. Selling GLPs kind of under the table isn't exactly a great business to be in, right. But they will figure out the next thing and the next thing and the next thing because they're Hims. They always seem to figure it out. And healthcare is such a big space that, he's literally told you by 2030, we're going to be $6 billion. And it's not because he's guessing, he's got a plan, and look at the plan. Imagine being the Series A investor. Kid comes to you and says, yeah, 50 million valuation. How much business do you have? Well, a couple million in pharmacy sales. And you're like, okay, well, we'll see. And then 6 billion in revenue. I mean, right. Unbelievable success. I think he's probably going to beat the 6 billion. But again, is now the time? Is today the time? Your strategy wise, it's probably along. I think it probably belongs in most portfolios, but it's not to say it's riskless. Nothing is riskless.
Martin, is TLT the most obvious trade in the market as rates probably have to come down?
I'm not a macro guy. I've never been good at it. It's just not what I do.
Cool. That's fair. Okay. Rapid fire questions. We really appreciate the time, Martin. Audience loving you. We got 6,000 people here that really appreciate your thoughts, even if they may disagree with you, but you know how to communicate very well about the stock market. And that's because obviously you understand the markets really well. Archer, any thoughts on them?
Not really.
Okay.
Seems bubblicious.
Okay. Rocket Lab, any thoughts on them?
Seems bubblicious. I know a lot of people like this one, but man.
Okay.
Not for me.
Have you looked at Grab ever by any chance?
Not really.
Okay. MicroStrategy, Bitcoin. General thoughts. Does this explode?
Yeah. So one of my big hobbies is cracking Bitcoin, trying to. It's led me down a lot of really interesting roads. I have a GitHub repo on some of my work. I'll update later today. I think Satoshi's tokens on the this is very technical, on P2PK script, the original P2PK, not P2PKH or Taproot or SegWit. Those tokens, which are about 9% of Bitcoin, they will be hacked. Now, whether it's me that does it or not, we'll see. But
wait, why are you so confident that they're going to be hacked?
The public key is shown on those tokens. You need to calculate, which is impossible, most people say, and a normal 99% of me agrees. 1% still going to try. The public key of the ECC curve is 256 bits, so it's 256 ones and zeros, or about 77 digits. That public key matches a 77-digit private key. If you guess this private key, you win. Every other Bitcoin, the other 91%, they don't show you the private key. So you don't even know what the number is to guess. But you have the number here. You just don't know how to go from one way to the other. Now, it's very hard, but quantum computers can do this very easily. Right. There's no such thing as a quantum computer yet that can do it. But, in 10 years, when we can do this magic number trick, we can turn this one number to this other number. That's the one thing I do concede quantum computers could do. Again, don't know if it's 10 years, don't know if it's 20 or 30, but no matter what, the people at the Bitcoin Foundation and who control the GitHub repo, no matter what they do, they cannot stop these tokens unless they blacklist them, which they can do.
Right.
That's the only saving grace. They can say, we're deleting Satoshi's tokens. He's dead. The problem with that is that, what does it say to the rest of the Bitcoin market?
Yeah.
It's like, maybe you could delete your tokens too. And I don't think that's good. So if they leave Satoshi's tokens there, it's 9% of the supply that's inevitably going somewhere, probably to the first guy with a quantum computer that figures it out. Maybe the guy that's using all the quantum computer time on the clouds right now. But regardless, it'll be cracked someday. I think that is very obvious. Even the people knee deep in this on the Bitcoin board or the Bitcoin community acknowledge this. And I don't know what you do about, imagine you had a stock where you knew 9% of the stock was going to be sold.
Right.
It could be one of these things where you say, well, if they sell it in an orderly way, or maybe they burn it.
Right.
They could do it in if they burned it, they'd be burning $100 billion. I don't know who wants to do that.
Do you think Bitcoin is a hedge against money printing? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, it is. And I hate to say it because I thought Trump was going to be a bearish thing for Bitcoin. Because Trump was supposed to basically, Bitcoin is an asset that was born in crisis. In the blockchain, inscribed in it is the financial crisis, right? It's the newspaper of the banks failing.
Right.
And Satoshi was clearly telling you in only so many words that how do you trust people to organize a monetary system? You can't. They're going to print money. They're going to do political things. We need something that is beyond the AOCs and even quite frankly, sometimes the Trumps of the world. If they're going to print all this money, we need something else. So he told you that. So Trump was supposed to come in, cut the deficit, cut the spending, cut the bullshit. And also Bitcoin was born in crisis in a time of invasion of privacy and censorship and anti-money laundering laws and know your client laws and all this stuff that gums the financial system. Bitcoin doesn't have any of that. So Trump was supposed to cut that, stop the surveillance state. None of that's happening, so Bitcoin is still needed. They're still being censored. People are still being kicked out of bank accounts. Inflation is rampant. The need for Bitcoin still exists. I thought Trump would come in and people would say, well, why do we need cryptocurrency? What good is it for? The government's not spying on me anymore. Inflation's been tamed. We've tamed that beast.
Right.
Budget's going back to normal. But no, actually things seem like they're worse. It seems like the US is going to go bankrupt. It seems like inflation isn't going anywhere. It seems like civil liberties. Look, I'm a Republican, but you have to call a spade a spade. Trump's not exactly, Mr. Civil Liberties. I mean, he is taking people and chucking them out of the country. So, what team you're on depends. But right now, the Democrats are looking at it saying, we feel he's a fascist. Now, I don't agree. But when the Democrats were in charge, I think they're fascist, So nobody's tamping it down and saying, all right, let's all kind of calm down. It's the country's sort of a shit show. So that's the kind of time where you want Bitcoin. Because if we have to reorder the entire financial system of the world, as much as I think Bitcoin's kind of silly, it's a good place to start. If you are going to reorder the financial system of the world, it is widely distributed already. Again, it's just a little crappy database, and I could spin one up now or right on my terminal. Would you want to buy a piece of my little crappy database? No.
Did you own a decent chunk of Bitcoin or
no comment?
AMD, thoughts on AMD?
Don't know well.
Okay. Here's an interesting one that I think is really a funny one. Apple.
It's a tough one. He's a very different kind of manager, Cook. He's sort of this like ruthless executor, but the company's lost its magic, obviously. It's probably one of these stocks where there's nothing to do. Could they make something big work? Yes. Is AI going to lift their boat just because? Yeah. They're really good at chips. That's the one thing that's super impressive about them, and shocking. You never would have thought, they'd be this good at chips. And that's kind of one of the things that could save them. But it does feel like Apple's tired. It's just as tired as Microsoft was at the Microsoft peak, where it was like people didn't like the evil empire of Microsoft, and at least on the consumer side. And
do you think Apple could be a healthcare play in a real way? No,
they don't have the focus. To be really good at this, you need somebody who's just a killer executive that's going to be really well compensated and is going to smash everything. And these bigger companies, they're just too DEI-ified, and like you can't make something like that work at Apple. I think it has to come from outside. And you can see what have they innovated on? They flopped on Vision Pro. AirPods is okay, but in general, this company hasn't done something new in 20 years almost.
Do you think XRP is a scam?
I do.
Why?
Doesn't do anything. Nobody uses it. I think that Bitcoin is a lot like that too, but it's more Lindy for one. There's a greater, it's a widely distributed thing. I have a friend who owns over $1 billion of Bitcoin, and he's a famous entrepreneur. We actually mentioned his name in this podcast at one point. And, he said, Martin, I know Bitcoin's bullshit, but it's bullshit enough people believe. And I don't disagree. I love Bitcoin in one part of my mind. In the other part of my mind, I agree with Warren Buffett. I mean, what the fuck is it? It's nothing. It's like old, crappy database, hard to update, hard to maintain. And I think one of the bearish things for Bitcoin, just to put a bow on this, is interesting, is when people figure out that those Satoshi tokens are gone, it's a big bearish catalyst, because it's not so much that the tokens get sold. Yes, they might cause a panic sale or whatever. It'll bounce back from that. Even if they sell it to $1, they're going to walk it right back up. The bigger problem is that Satoshi is the mythology. The mythos of Bitcoin is a big part of it. Here's this mystery man that drops money, the new money on us, and disappears. He doesn't even sell his own tokens. He just drops 100 billion too and says, I don't need it. Right. Maybe he's dead, maybe he's not. Point is, when elliptic curve cryptography and Shor's algorithm that cracks it, that existed at the time Satoshi wrote Bitcoin. Shor's algorithm goes back to the 90s. He should have known this was a problem. And he left these Bitcoin there anyway. So the more we crack the Satoshi myth, that he was this mythological god, and more realize that he was just a dude, he was a programmer, and he made mistakes, that maybe it becomes one of these things that was like, why are we all kind of like, putting trillions of dollars in the whole financial system on this code that we can't update, that has flaws? And what happens if another computer, a probabilistic computer, a thermodynamic computer, whatever kind of computer we don't even think about, what if that cracks the rest of the 91% of Bitcoin? What do we do then? Do we just censor the Bitcoin we don't like? It's not the perfect system at all. And, but it's hard to crack the mythology of it. That's what keeps a bunch of it going. That's what keeps the people evangelizing it. The crazy people, I think Saylor's nuts. I mean, I think he's basically manic. I think he's not sober in terms of his attitude. I don't know about his personal life, but he just is so drunk on Bitcoin. He's
what you call drunk, people would call conviction.
No, I mean, I have conviction and stuff, but I think that part of conviction is acknowledging, the downside. And, there's no imperfect investment. And, I think it's really disingenuous for him to tell the people that there's no late time to buy Bitcoin. The 100,000x is over, man. We're never getting that again. If Bitcoin took over the entire financial system, it's maybe a 10x. So, it's a bit silly to sort of say, you got to get in Bitcoin. What you're trying to get people to mark up your position is what you're trying to do. And you don't see him sitting there saying, let's put Bitcoin in payments, because it can't be used in payments.
Yeah. No, right.
He's not, so to me, I think Saylor's a bit of a charlatan. Again, I appreciate his evangelism of Bitcoin, but it seems like this is more of a pump and dump for him than not a dump, just a pump and pump.
Yeah.
For him more than it is anything else.
All right.
And some people are okay with that. Some people want to pump and pump.
Well, it's trading at almost 2x NAV, so I guess so. Absolute last question for you, Martin, and then I just want you to give us the Goodell pitch. Here's the question. Meta, Google, Amazon, Nvidia, Tesla, Microsoft, Apple. If you had to pick one Mag 7 over the next decade, what is the one you go long on? And you can't own the other 6.
Okay. So definitely not Apple. Probably not Google. I want to put Meta and Nvidia on the maybe side. Probably not Amazon. Do I got them all? Microsoft. Probably not Microsoft. So it's between Meta and
Nvidia. So you have a lot of respect for Zucks.
I do. I think he's the beast. I was talking to Barron Trump about. Barron was like glazing Elon. He was like, Elon's the best. Da, da, da. And I said, don't sleep on Zuck. He's like, no, we don't. I said, don't sleep on Zuck. He's just as good as Elon or better. He is he's the absolute unit. And we don't know what Zuck has planned for us anytime soon, but he's got a bunch of cool stuff. I don't know which part of it and what will work. I don't know, but he's still young and he's still hungry, and it's clear he's one of the best ever. And
what about Tesla? Is Tesla on that list of no?
It's just that, okay, I'll tell you a really quick story. So there was a guy named Al Mann. He passed away. He created the first insulin pump and then the first cochlear implant. Brilliant guy. Made billions. Then he was making the first inhaled insulin. And this was like early in my career. I fought him. He almost actually physically tried to beat me up. He was 82. It was that bad, the short versus the founder.
Right.
And Al Mann, he's like, don't you know who I am? I'm this guy, that guy. He was the Elon Musk of medtech. And his last gasp was to do inhaled insulin. He was wrong. I was right. I took him down. He forever blamed me for beating his company up and defeating it. He died having wasted his last few billions on this dream. In the scheme of things, the guy was a brilliant guy and a wonderful guy. But he also, for whatever reason, decided to put all of his money behind a bad idea. I can't for certain say if Elon's going to be right or wrong. And that's the mystery of the markets, right?
Right.
On one hand, I think he's probably going to be right. But on the other hand, Nvidia gets paid if he's right. And Nvidia kind of gets paid no matter what. So we don't know. You just don't know if you're about to be the next Al Mann. There are people that their first company works, the second company works, third company works, fourth company makes them broke. It happens all the time. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Elon. I think he's great, but I don't know him. I don't sit down with him every day. I don't know what he's doing day to day. I don't know if he's lost his mind or not. No clue. Do you?
No.
We don't know. So we only can watch what he's doing, and even there we just get imperfect information. So you're betting big. Basically, half of Tesla is this leverage bet on robotics. I don't know if the future is going to be robotics. He's telling you it's going to be. But again, Al Mann told me inhaled insulin was going to be the biggest thing ever. Nobody was going to inject insulin ever again. Right. I said no, and I was right. And, the guy had billions of dollars. I had millions of dollars. And, some of his money became my money. And it's one of these things where, you just because there's a big upside potential risk doesn't mean you have to take it. You can still respect. I mean, he's probably going to do it. But I'd like to, if I can get my cake and eat it too. So if I can see the robots coming out,
right,
and the revenues grow, and then I can buy, and it's the price, if the market blesses me by giving me the opportunity to still buy at a good price, then I'm all in.
Right.
But, sometimes the market, Mr. Market, shouts at you a really good price. And sometimes he doesn't. I may never get that chance on Tesla. But the stars just might align where the robots, like, let's say people start losing faith in us. The robots aren't coming. Fuck the robot. And Tesla revenue's down for the auto. And there's a big crisis. He's got a margin call, whatever it is. And you could buy Tesla for 10 times earnings in a recession. And then you see that the robots are coming and you see it is real. Then you go all in. Right. So like now, this price at this risk profile, I still would be long, but in that panoply of companies, maybe Nvidia better.
Right.
Maybe I'd say Tesla's number 3. So I put Nvidia, Meta, and then Tesla, and then maybe Microsoft, and and then Amazon, and then Apple.
But
But we'll see. It's hard to tell. These are the most looked at stocks in the world, and you can sort of basically assume that their valuations are relatively right.
right.
At the given moment, everyone in the world is analyzing them, and markets are machines that work. There may be changes that we don't know about, but once those changes we're made aware of them, the markets will adjust. And I believe in the markets. I don't think they always work, otherwise we wouldn't have jobs.
Right.
But I think 90% of the time they work. So it's a little bit difficult to tell the future on those.
Martin, we really appreciate your time. There's Martin's Twitter. I mean, my audience has absolutely loved this and enjoyed it.
Thanks so much. If I can plug my thing real quick.
Yeah. So this is what I'm gonna do. So Goodell. So dude, I'm gonna be honest. I still pay for this every month, but I don't use it, and that's more of a me thing. I just like force of habit. I haven't been using it, but I saw it in January. It's a Bloomberg terminal competitor, and I've been familiar with your brand, so I paid for it, and I just need to start using it a lot more. What is it? Why are you trying to compete against Bloomberg? And you went through some stuff over the past decade, went to prison, came back. Why is this the next big idea?
Yeah, so I've been involved in financial software my whole life. I actually was a software guy for most of my life before I did pharma very seriously. I was a programmer growing up. I love software. So if you know the Bloomberg terminal, it's really efficient. It is hard to use and hard to learn. The average person doesn't know how to use a Bloomberg terminal, but we made a backwards compatible version. So if you know Bloomberg, you know Godel. And if you learn Godel, you learn Bloomberg.
Right.
So the key to it is pressing the button on top of your tab, the backtick button.
Yeah.
So when you press that button, we actually made this thing so you're not supposed to use your mouse. So just throw your mouse away. And now hit the backtick and type PLTR and hit enter. And that's sort of how it works. Now type HDS and hit enter. You used your mouse.
You're right. I did.
Those are the holders. Press escape twice.
Wow.
Now type N.
That's news, right? Yeah.
And hit enter. Yeah. This is the most comprehensive news. No ads in the news. No ads anywhere on our platform. The most comprehensive news. In fact, there are more stories on our platform than there are on Bloomberg, which is something that we worked really hard to get. So it's not quite Bloomberg yet, but it is also 95% cheaper than Bloomberg. So, I always wondered why Bloomberg was so expensive. And, I love programming. And I also think that one of the biggest things that's problem out there is that nobody can quantitatively invest. And I kind of want to build that for people. I also have a lot of social features in there. So there's chat rooms and all kinds of stuff that's fun. So, Robin just got out of the hood was a funny one.
How are you able to charge $60 a month for this? Like, that seems pretty cheap.
Well, it's also free. So you can actually just mess around with it for free. And that's something a lot of people don't know. And we have thousands and thousands of users, tens of thousands of users. And we still haven't even publicly announced it. So I haven't tweeted about it yet. So it's still kind of like early days and under wraps. And we're going to hopefully we're adding bonds to it. We're adding, it's going to be the full feature of Bloomberg. I'm ready to take them down. I just honestly hate Bloomberg. They banned me from their product. I was a user since I was 17. They're a very political organization. They have a news team that hates me. It's become personal, for whatever reason, this is personal. Mike is one of the rich, a lot of people don't know this. Mike Bloomberg may be the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
And it's the Forbes people finally figured this out. He's like number 7 or something, but people just don't know how rich he is. I would guess about 400, 500 billion.
So Forbes says 104, but you think it's
even just Bloomberg alone is worth 200.
Yeah.
So, and then the funny thing about Bloomberg is every year he pays himself a dividend of 5 to 10 billion for the last, for the last 40 years.
And that's probably why they haven't gone public, right? They enjoy.
And what does he do with the money? Does he just throw it away? No, he's been investing it and making 20% on that money. The guy might have $1 trillion for all we know. It's kind of nuts.
Do you think you could sell this to hedge funds and they could use this over Bloomberg?
Yeah, we're mostly going to target, Wall Street. But I also think that if you look at AWS, kind of my vision here is like, all right, Bloomberg, you can't even go on Bloomberg right now. And even if you're a billionaire, you can't slap your Amex down and say, give me that thing. You can't. Yeah. And if you're broke, forget it. If you have less than 10 million, you don't even bother. It's just not worth it. It's 30 grand a year. So AWS, when you jump on Amazon Web Services, it doesn't matter if you're Netflix and you're paying them $5 billion a year, you're our company and maybe you're paying them 100 grand a year, or if you're hobbyist and you're paying them nothing a year. They want you no matter what because it's the best system. I'm the same way. If you don't want to pay this thing, don't pay it. It's fine. I'm not going to show you. I'm not going to give you the stuff that costs me a lot of money and I'm going to lose tons of money on you. but I'm gonna give you some stuff, and I'm probably gonna lose a little bit of money on you. And if you pay me, I'm gonna give you the world. And that's, kind of the way we do this. And it's early days, but I'm excited.
Why was this the big idea? Why were you so excited to start this?
Yeah, I think that financial software hasn't changed. So Bloomberg hasn't changed in 15 years. And the sad thing is, most people wouldn't know this, but the quantitative world has completely changed Wall Street. The average guy in Wall Street 30 years ago was a cigar chomping frat boy with a famous last name like Kennedy or something that went to Yale. The average guy in Wall Street now is a Chinese programmer who won a math contest. And it is a very different world. And why is that? Well, markets are very technical and efficient. And the top 10 hedge funds on it, they used to be all stock pickers and macro pickers. Of the top 10 hedge funds now, 9 are quants. 9 out of 10. The whole market's mathematical. I wouldn't say it's rigged, because that's not the right word. But if you're trying to out trade people, it's really tricky. These firms are making 20, 30 billion a year, and you're paying them. We're paying them when we trade. And I want to make systems that can at least show you some of this and compete on it. And like the best tools right now, like Bloomberg, they don't have any tools like that, and they don't really help you very much. So we're going to try to cater to a more modern audience that knows how to program, that's more technical, that really wants to make money by any means necessary, like not gambling on whether or not a stock might go up, but really having a system that will make the money. And it's a group of people that are really smart. So if you go into the press backtick real quick and type in Jane, or type in Citadel.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, just type in Jane real quick. You had it up for a second. Don't press enter. Don't press enter. Yeah. So you see all those people there? Those are all people that work at Jane Street that you can, if you click on one of them, you get their personal phone number and email.
What?
Yep. So
holy crap.
Type Blackstone.
This is not available to the average person.
Right?
Jonathan Gray.
Jonathan Gray. Hit it real quick. Jonathan Gray's for $10 billion. It might have popped up somewhere else or something.
Yeah.
Press enter. Press arrow. Use your arrows and then hit enter when it's on the name. Press down, and hit enter.
There it is.
Yeah, there you go. There's
holy
email.
Crap, dude.
Yeah. Phone number and email. So you want to network. You really want to be on Wall Street. You really want to be a player. You're not going to do it on Robinhood. It's just not going to happen. You can't even short on Robinhood. Trying to make a real system that really works. I feel bad for this guy, Jason Brown. Sorry, dude. But the point is, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to if you're an individual investor to play with one hand tied behind your back. I always say, like, would you fight Brock Lesnar tonight in the cage? People are you crazy? I'll get my ass kicked. And it's like, well, why are you trading against Citadel and Jane Street? You got to fight these guys. If you're going to compete and the markets are competition, fight them head to head, fight fire with fire. And I think that's something that's really hard to do if your tools suck. And again, great firms, Jane Street, Citadel, some of my best friends work there, but they're killing us. They're making tons of money. Anyway, I appreciate the plug.
So real quick, $80 a month. That's it. That's for people if they want to use it.
Yeah, it's $80 a month. Listen, we're going after people who have tons of money. It's free. You're not going to get everything for free. I think one day we'll have something that's like AWS, where you pay for what you use. We want everyone to get access to everything, but it costs me millions of dollars to get data on bonds and things like that. It's not cheap, but I'm planning to give you as much as I can for free. Again, just don't like Bloomberg. I'm happy to have a $1 billion company and take them down. I don't need the $200-300 billion company Mike has. But I also know that Wall Street is a place with a lot of money, and they're willing to pay tons of money for software. So I still want to make individuals happy, but it's hard to balance that.
Yeah. Martin, I appreciate it, man. Means a lot. Thank you for the 3 hours. Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great one.